So hello friends, welcome back to my tutorial, and in this video we'll be looking at the what is the controllers, views, viewbag and area in MVC. So let's first have a look onto the controllers. So the controllers contains particular logic which is executed whenever controller is called. It is also works as a bridge between model and view. So basically we can say that all the processing part, or we can say all the logic part, can be written onto the controller. So as soon as the controller has been called, at that time the processing part or the logic you have written has been executed and the result will be sent to the views. So let's have a look onto the views. So the views are used to hold the presentation part of the website, which contains CSS, HTML, JavaScript and all the stuff related to presentation of the data. So for an example, if you are making a program of addition, or we can say calculator, and if you are performing an addition of two numbers onto the controller, and whatever the output, or we can say whatever the result has been generated, can be sent to the views, and then the views are used to represent those data in a fancy manner with the help of the bootstrap, CSS and all those things. So let's move ahead and have a look on area. So basically the area is used to generate the separate MVC structure for particular domain. For example, you can create separate MVC structure for admin, separate MVC structure for user and so on. So basically the situation arises that if we were thinking about the old traditional ASP.NET Core application, at that time if we are having multiple users in our system, like admin, user, register user and all other users are there. So what we are performing, that we'll be making a folder of admin and we will be storing all the related files into that admin folder. Same we are performing for the registered user, that all the files and pages are stored into that particular folder. So to manage all this kind of structure, we can use the area inside the MVC framework. So basically whenever you are preparing for an area, at that time you can create the admin area. At that time you are having a separate structure for admin and so on. You will be having a more better understanding when you are looking at the practical session of these things. So the last one is a viewbag. So the viewbag is used to hold the small amount of data which can be rendered onto the view. For example, you can store page title, some short description about the page and so on. So basically we can store the some of the information into the viewbag, and then we can also render those information onto the views. So let's quickly move to the Visual Studio so we can have a practical session of all those things and we can more clearly understand these things. So basically I'll be using Visual Studio 2013, and you can also prefer the newer versions. So the functionalities and all the things are depends on your version. So let's click on new project, as we are beginning with the new project. I'll be going with the CSAP version, so click on the Visual Studio CSAP and then go to the web, and inside that we can go with the ASP.NET web application. So inside ASP.NET web application, let's rename this application, and I'll be writing CRUD in MVC, where we'll be using LNQ to SQL. So I'll be writing LNQ. So this is the how we can go with the naming convention, and then click on OK. So new pop-up will appear where you need to select the MVC. So as soon as the processing has been completed, we need to wait for it, and when the processing has been completed to create the project, at that time the folders and files are appear into the Solution Explorer. So inside the Solution Explorer we can have a more better look about the folder structure of our project. So we can get a more better idea that how it actually works and what are the contents are available inside our project. So the time for creating the project is depends on your system and the version of Visual Studio you are using. And yes, finally the project has been created, and let's quickly move to the details of the folder structure of this project. So first of all, we are having properties and then references. Let's ignore those both things now, and let's quickly move to the app underscore data. So basically, if the app underscore data is a special folder which is used to store the database related files, or we can say you can also store the SDF or MDF or any SQL files into the app underscore data, so you can quickly access them, as well as you can also transfer those data, or we can say project, to the different system. So the next one is app underscore start, and which consists of the route config cs file. So as we have discussed earlier, that the route config.cs file is used to manage the routing for the system. So it contains the default routing, which is home and index, which means the home controller and the index method. So this is the routing method which will be called whenever the application has been executed. So the next one is a content folder, where we can see that it contains the CSS files, and people are also preferring to create the CSS folder separately and storing all the CSS file inside that. The next one is the controller, which is the main area to discuss about. So basically the controllers folder contains all the controllers which will be creating inside this application. And now we are having two controllers are available, but we will delete or remove this controller and will create our own controllers. So the next one is the font, which is no need to be discussed, as it is a normal thing which will be come from the traditional ASP.NET applications. So the next one is the model. The model is basically used to stores the records, or we can say stores the data. So where you can also defines the entity framework, LNQ to SQL, and so many other things you can also define inside the model, as well as you can also create your custom class to stores the records records of the data. So basically this is how the model works. The next one is the script. It contains the JS files and all other script which are needed to run this application. So the next one is the view folder. Basically the view folder is used to store the views for the controllers. So basically as soon as you create a controller, at that time the specific folder for that view is also created. So basically, for an example, we are having a home controller, so we also having the home folder which will contain all the views related to the home controller. So this is how it works. So the next thing is sad. So basically the sad folder is used to define the layouts for the application. So you can also define the different layouts for the application, just like a different layout for admin, user, and all those things. And for that you need to define the layout inside the sad folder, and for that you need to create a partial view. So let's remove some unnecessary things, as we'll be starting from the beginning. So I'll be removing all those things so we can have a more better idea about that how we can create the controllers, views, and all those things. So all the things are removed, and let's move to the controller and views. So basically to create a controller, just simply right click onto the controller and then go to the add, and inside that you need to select the controller. A screen will appear in which you are having multiple options, the type of controller you want to create. So basically in my Visual Studio version I'll be having three controllers are available to create, while depends on your Visual Studio version, you may have a different variety of options there. So the first one is having the empty controller. So basically whenever you are using the empty controller, at that time there is only controller classes available, and all other things, or we can say all the methods, you need to create by yourself. So the next one is read write actions. So whenever you are going with the controller with read write actions, at that time some of the methods are already pre-made. So basically you just need to use those methods directly, so you don't need to define those methods. So the next one is controller with views using entity framework. So if you are sure to go with the entity framework, at that time you can use this controller, where all the methods and things are already available according to the entity framework database specification. So for now the best option for me is to go with the empty controller, so I'll be going with the empty controller and click onto the add. So here we need to name the controller, so I'll be naming it as home controller, and as soon as the controller has been created, at that time we can see that a new folder has been also created inside the view folder. So this is how it stores the files of the controller, or we can say views for the controller. So let's create some method and move further. So I'll be creating some methods just like public action result, and I'll be creating something like about. So this is the about method, and it also returns the view. So the next one is I'll be creating the home method. So let me create the home method. So I'll be creating a home method, and this will also return the view. So this is how it works. And one more thing we need to care about, that the methods also contains the attributes something like http post and get. So if we are defining the attribute of http get onto the method, at that time the situation arises that this method can only be accessed via the get method. So you need to define the get method inside the form also. And the another one is available is http post. So if you'll be defining the http post for the method, at that time the situation arises that you need to you can now only access this method via the post. So now you need to define the post method inside the form. So I'll be removing these things now, as we don't want to make our application complicated now, as we are just learning these things. So as we can see, we are having three methods are available. First one is index, which is executed by default. The second one is about, and the last one is home. So basically let me just rename it, and now it's time to create the views for them. So to create a view, just right click onto the method and select add view. So as soon as you select the add view, at that time the screen will appear in which you need to just specify the view name. The second one is template. So if you want to create a view for particular specific task, just like create, delete, details, and all those things, at that time you can go with the model. So where you need to then select the model class and data context class. So your all the codes are generated dynamically, and you don't need to write any of the code. So if you want to insert the record, you can go with the create template, and then you can select the model class and all those things. So this is how you can also work with them, but for now we are going to develop these things from the scratch. So I'll be skipping this content. So the next one is view options. So basically the view options are create as a partial view. So if you are going to develop, or you can design layouts, at that time you need to select the create as a partial view. So the next one is use a layout pages. So basically I'll be not having any layouts available now, so I'll be just uncheck this option, and now we need to create the view. So as soon as you click onto the add button, at that time the view has been created. This is like index.cshtml. So let's go back to the controller and right click onto the about method and select on add view. The same configuration will work, so I'll be just clicking onto the add, and now a new view has been created. The same thing for the third method, like home. So I'll be just creating onto the add view, and then I'll just need to click onto the add. So this is how things are working, and we can create the views and all those things. So now let's write some short description onto the views, so we can have a more better idea about that whenever it is executed. So this is the index view. I'll be doing the same thing for all those things. So like I'll be writing and change it to about view, and the last one is I'll be just changing to home view. So this is how we can do this, and let's run this application and just have a look at how it will be looks. Do we get the output or not? So you can run the application by clicking onto the green button, and as soon as you click onto the button, at that time the application has been executed, and once the build has been finished, at that time you will see the output onto the screen. So until the output has been appear, we just need to wait for it, and I'll be expecting index view for this. So this is the index view, this is the output we have get. So now let's go back to the coding part, and now it's time to access the some of the other views. So basically, to access some of the other views, now I'll be not putting any links there, so we'll be accessing those views by the URL. So generally it's not a good idea to access those things from the URL, so I think it's better so if we write the href for them, it might looks little bit of good. So let's do that. So something like about, and we can name it something like about. So and same thing for home, so I'll be just naming it as home, and let's save it, and let's try to refresh these things. And if you are making changes onto the okay, so I just haven't provided the br. I just wanted to say that if you are making changes to the views, at the time you can directly refresh and you can see your output there, so no need to recompile the code. But if you are making changes into the controller, at that time you need to rebuild the code and then rerun the application. So let's click onto the about page and let's see. So this is the about page. If you go back, then if you press on home, it will say this is the home view. So this is how it works, and this is how we can create the controllers. So let's move ahead, and let's have a look onto the view bags. And once the view bag has been completed, we can move to the areas folder. So for the view bags, let's say let's create a view bag here. So as you, if you remember the theory that view bags are used to store the small amount of information, so I'll be putting a information something like title, and I'll be writing this is the title for index view. So I'll be doing the same thing for all those things. So like instead of index, I'll be writing about, and for home I'll be replacing these things. So now it's time to access the view bags. So inside this, if you want to access the view bag, you just need to write down the I'll be writing p tag. Even you can also go with directly without writing any tags there. So I'll be using @ that is for the razor syntax. You can also create forms into the razor syntax, but you can also prefer to go with the traditional HTML forms also. So I'll be using the @, and you can also access lots of many methods via these things, but for now I'll be using the view bag. So @, and I'll be using view bag, and we have named it as title. So I'll be using the title, and let's just copy paste these things all over, so we can have a more better idea about that. Let's change it to something h3, so we can see the differentiation between those things. So I just rename change it everywhere. Okay, so I just saved these things. Okay, so before running this application, let's also have a look onto the area, so I can show you more better way that how actually it works. So basically, if you remember the theory, the areas are used to provide the separation of structure. So as you can now see, we are having the controller and the model and the view for all for common. So basically, if you want this structure separately for a particular user, at that time you can use the area. So for that you need to just right click onto your application name into the solution explorer, then you can go to the add, and inside that you will find an option to add the area. So inside the area you just need to write down the name of the area. So I'll be naming it is as admin. So when you click on OK, at that time the area has been created, and now you can see inside the areas folder the admin area is created, and you can now see the admin area contains the separation of MVC structure. So the admin area itself having the separate MVC structure to work with, and the things are working the same, just like you can right click onto the controller, add, and then controller, and inside that the same thing will appear. I'll be going with the empty one, and here you can create the controller. So I'll be going into the home controller again, and then you can also create the views for them. So for creating the views, just right click onto the index, add view, and I'll be going with the empty one. So now let me just write here, this is the admin area index view. So also have a look that how we can navigate to them. So let me just copy this code, and I'll be writing something like admin area index, and to make it work we need to write something like admin area slash something like this, admin area, and inside that home. So I'll be just writing let me just write it something like admin, and inside that home. So I have just put it capital, so I need to just write down capital, and let's have a look that does it working or not. Let's see, and if having an issue we'll be solving it, and we'll move further. So let's save it, and let's have a look that does it working properly or not. So inside this I also need to specify the method name. So let's have a look that we are having the index method. So I'll be just providing the, so we are having the area name, controller name, and the method name. So I'll be just writing the method name is index. So let's close all those things, as sometimes it creates the confusion. So I'll be just putting it here, and let me just rerun the application, and let's have a look that the things are working properly or not. So I just executed the application, and I was expecting the output that yes, finally. So I'll be expecting this, that something will definitely went wrong. The reason is that we haven't executed the application via controller. So I just open this tab, and I run the application. So by default it runs the index one. So let's click onto the home controller, and now run the application. Okay, so what it say, multiple types were found that match the controller named home. This can happen if the route that serves this request does not specify the namespace to search for a controller that matches the request. So it says that we have defined the multiple home controllers, so that may creating the issue here. So let's remove this controller, and for that let's define some different controller. So if you remember, to create a controller, right click onto the controller, add, and then controller, and I'll be just taking as empty, and let's have something like admin controller. So I'll be just clicking on add, and as soon as the controller is created, right click onto the index and just create add view. So inside that I'll be just taking the this view index. So this is the admin index view. So let me save it, and let's go back here and just made some changes here. So something like we need to write down the admin slash index. So let's rebuild the application, and have a look that having any errors or not. So rebuild is successed, and let's run this application. So I'll be running this application and hoping that none of the errors will come. So as soon as the processing has been completed, the output will appear. So yes, finally we are getting the output that this is the index view, and if we click onto the about, it says this is the about view. As you have noticed, we are also getting the h3, that is title, and which is coming from the viewbags. So let's uh, open the coding and have a look that this is how we have set the viewbags. So viewbag.title, and this is the value, and inside the index this is how we have accessed them. So at the rate viewbag.title. So this is how we have accessed them. And let's move back to the output and access the admin area index. So just click on it, and it says this is the admin index view, and just look at the URL. The URL says that admin area, inside that admin controller and the index method. So this is how you can access the areas for the different users, and all the things are can be structurized in a more better way. So I hope so that you are getting the basic idea about working with the controllers, views, and view bags and the areas. So this is all for this video, and we'll see you in my next video.